Game of Thrones had one of the best pilots of television that I have ever seen, but did you know that this is actually pilot number 2, and pilot number 1 was a giant crazy disaster that almost got the entire show canceled? But yeah, no, there's an entire other pilot that the world has never seen, and probably will never see, because everyone who was involved in it thinks that it was really, really bad. Also, it cost $10 million to do, and everyone hated it. That is insane. Also, with the state of the world today, don't forget about this, because, this might not be here. Hey, don't spiral over it, Ronnie. But yeah, I'm feeling kind of nostalgic today, so I was thinking about the pilot episode, which I've recently rewatched and remembered, a lot of the things that I loved about it. Specifically, really just all the Winterfell stuff. Everything on Winterfell is so compelling, is so interesting. The scheming, the planning, it's great. The Jaime and Cersei of it all. The ending of pushing Bran out the Like, do you remember the first time you watched that? And like the moment where you're like, oh my god, is he gonna push him? Is he gonna push him? And then he does it. He fucking does it, man. Now, the pilot isn't perfect by any means, of course, because the changes made to Dany's storyline, I do not think were great. So, yeah, but we're going to skip past that. That's not what we're talking about. Even though I am saying it was bad what they did in the pilot, they did not need to do that to her character, okay? The original pilot was an unmitigated disaster for a number of reasons. The big one being it was really, really boring. Because as we would learn as the series went on, these two chucklefucks, D&D, Dan and Dave, who were the showrunners of the project, they'd never done a TV show before. They'd honestly barely done movies before. So, like, how they got everyone to okay this is still, like, kind of a mystery. Though it did ultimately take them, like, 5 years to get this off the ground. So, like, at least they had to work for it. But still, like, how? But having never written for TV, there were a lot of, like, nuances that didn't initially translate well when they were trying to adapt the books. Because, again, this is a different medium. Different mediums require different things, based on their strengths and weaknesses. And, in a book, you could have paragraphs and paragraphs of exposition explaining, like, who these characters are, their relationship to one another, so that it's perfectly clear in your mind. But in a visual medium, if you don't get, like, cues through the visuals or the sounds, the speech, whatever, you're going to be confused. So in the original pilot, there were a lot of issues. One of the big ones was that people didn't realize that Cersei and Jaime were brother and sister. So, when the episode culminates in the way that it culminates with, Bran getting yeeted, people were like, what the fuck? Okay, she's having an affair. Like, why are they killing a child? And had to be explained to the people watching, like, no, like that's her brother. Like, that's how big the affair is. And everyone was like, oh yeah, I didn't get that. There were also a number of casting differences. Emilia Clarke was not the original Daenerys Targaryen. She was not in the pilot. Another actress, I believe her name is Tamsin Merchant, was the original Daenerys. And then Michelle Fairley, who played Catelyn Stark, was also not the original Catelyn. They had a different actress, though I forget her name. And really, from everything you could read on it, because again, we are not allowed to see this because they have buried it. They are so fucking ashamed of this thing. But from everything we hear, like, it was just kind of boring. Like, because you didn't get who these people were, because the writers were not used to writing for television, everything was just, like, a little stale. Now, George R. R. Martin, bless his heart, has actually gone on the record and saying that he actually kind of liked the pilot, but he was the first one to say that, I'm probably a bad person to ask, though, because I'm so close to the material, so the issues with following and understanding, weren't a big deal for him. He was just excited to see his characters come to life, whereas, people who did not know the source material were like, what is happening? And to be fair, even with, like, the pilot that most of us agree was good, that was a struggle for probably, like, the first season, as people, like, were trying to, like, understand, like, okay, what's the family tree here? Who is who and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, big cast of characters, I get it. Yeah. The problem, as you would, imagine, is they spent $10 million on a single, pilot of television. That is a lot of money. That is not common, even, for HBO, and especially for HBO, like, at that point, like, why are you spending all this money on this shit? Because they went all out. They're like, hey, we're going to film on location. We're going to go to Northern Ireland. We're going to go to Morocco, for Westeros and Essos. We're going to, spend all the money on the locations. We're going to spend all the money on the costumes. It's going to be really awesome, only to have, the finished product be a dud. So it's at that point that there was a distinct possibility that the whole thing was going to be canned and, just taken as a loss, unless they could convince HBO to basically let them reshoot the entire thing. And I will say, to D&D's credit in this one very specific thing, from everything that I've read on this, they were pretty open about the fact that, like, no, we fucked up, which is very funny because this seems to be the only time that they're willing to admit that. But they went to HBO and they're like, no, there's a laundry list of problems. Here's how we would fix it. And they like went through and they didn't try to like bullshit them or sell them on like why this is actually like a good thing, blah, blah, blah. They're like, no. This is how I'd fix it. If you like let us do it again, this is what we will do and this is why it'll be better. And by some miracle, HBO agreed. Like, not everyone was sure how it would pan out, whether it was the writers themselves, the actors, whatever. But HBO okayed it, thought that there was, like, enough of a story there. Like, okay, I think I'm interested in this. These are just, like, cosmetic fixes, right? Or, you know, some writing things. Just, like, insert a scene here and there, right? Well, it turned out to be, like, a little bit more than that. Because they ended up doing, like, a big rewrite, adding a bunch of scenes and a bunch of, like, little cues to help the audience pick up on who was who. If you rewatch the pilot, there's some like interesting lines, I'll call them, where, for example, like Jamie, when they're talking to Cersei in their first scene together, he starts off by basically saying something along the lines of like, well, as your brother, I think this. And like, oh yeah, I see what you're doing there. And then when Tyrion gets to Winterfell, apparently afterwards in like ADR, they added like some people like shouting, look, oh, it's the imp, the queen's brother. Because like we really need to hammer it home. How are these people all related to each other? So why are they acting like this? And then of course there came to the recasting in the reshot pilot. The first one, the actress who played Catelyn Stark, she basically just in between decided that she no longer wanted to do it. She's like, I don't want to move to Northern Ireland, which like I mean I wouldn't mind. I'll take that socialized medicine, please. She decided she didn't want to do it, and HBO was like, okay, so like we have a contract, so do we force her, or do we just like say like, okay, fine, you can go? And they ended up saying you know she could go after, I don't remember who was, but basically someone saw Michelle Fairley in a play, I think it was like Othello, and they said like she was insane, she was so good, and they're like, yeah, put her in, like we can find someone that's great, it's gonna be her, which like yeah ended up being like a very good thing because Michelle Fairley is insane. Another reason I hate all you Catelyn haters, because like how are you watching that performance and not just in awe of this woman? The harder one though seems to have been Daenerys, because the original actress was excited to do it, wanted to do it, but for whatever reason, which you know none of us can verify because we haven't watched the thing, they felt like her scenes were some of the ones that weren't working the most in the series, and so the choice was made to replace her. Though like she still works. She was in that Amazon show with Orlando Bloom with the fairies and stuff. She was a lady in it. I remember like looking at her and being like, you look familiar, and then realizing I'm like, oh, you were the one who was like in the pilot, because I remember like looking you up like 10 years ago or whatever. God, it's been so long. I'm so old. I swear I didn't start feeling old until people started calling me Unk in the fucking comments. You can't call me Unk unless I am actually old enough to be your uncle, okay? And my oldest nephew is fucking 2 or 3 right now, so no, you are not old enough. Anyway, sorry. But anyway, so they ended up refilming the pilot, and they refilmed, I think it was like 90% of it. There are like a few little scenes here and there that you can, that still exist in the one that they aired, which if you like look closely, you can see, because the original pilot was like filmed on film itself, and then the later reshoot was on digital, so you can like kind of tell like the camera quality is a little different in like a couple of scenes and shots here and there. Also, it was filmed a year apart, so the kids in some shots look like wildly different. Like Sansa in one scene where she's being presented to Cersei is like the original shot of her when she is like a little kid, and then the rest of the episode, I think like most of the time you see her like a year later when they refilmed it, and she looks like a bit older. But it's crazy to think that this show that, you know, so many people fell in love with, and then read the books, and myself included, and got to do this whole fucking thing with you guys on TikTok. It's I don't know, it's crazy to think about, and I'm feeling very nostalgic and kind of, I don't know, saddy and stressy and depressing and all that because of everything going on. But I just wanted to talk about, like, you know, what sparked my original love for this, and it was the show. I shit on it a lot, but it was the show. But it did get bad, so like don't take this as I'm like, you know, forgiving all its sins. I will not forgive the sins, motherfuckers. But yeah, go follow me on the other place because I, you know, want to keep doing this. Okay, goodbye.